A Stoic master once said, "The world is the same for all of us. The difference is the mind through which we choose to see it." If your mind has been trained by fear, disappointment, and old wounds, it will show you only the shadows, but the moment you begin training it to look for what is good, what is stable, what is within your control, life itself starts to change. Not because the world becomes easier, but because you finally learn to guide your thoughts instead of being dragged by them. 1. You see what you consistently look for. You need to understand something very simple yet extremely powerful about the human mind. It is constantly filtering the world around you. Your brain receives millions of pieces of information every second, but it only allows a tiny portion of that information to reach your awareness. And what decides what you notice? Your past experiences, your habits, your emotional wounds, your fears, your expectations, and even the stories you have told yourself for years. The mind does not show you an objective reality. It shows you a personalized version of reality that it believes is most important for your survival. This means if you have spent years being hurt, disappointed, rejected, or criticized, your mind will automatically scan for signs that those experiences might repeat again. It will look for danger, flaws, problems, and negative outcomes, even when none exist. This is why you can walk into a room filled with blessings, people who care about you, opportunities waiting to be seen, calmness, safety, comfort, and still find the one thing that is wrong. Not because everything is bad, but because your mind has been trained to search for the bad first. Stoicism teaches that perception shapes experience. Two people may live through the exact same situation, but one will walk away defeated while the other becomes wiser and stronger. The difference is not the event, it is the interpretation. One person sees danger because their mind is conditioned to expect harm. The other sees opportunity because their mind is conditioned to look for growth. One sees loss because they are attached to what is gone. The other sees freedom because they understand that letting go creates space for something better. One sees suffering and asks, "Why me?" The other sees suffering and asks, "What can this teach me?" Your perception becomes the lens through which you judge the entire world, and if the lens is dirty, cracked, or clouded by old fears, the world will always look darker than it actually is. The most empowering truth is that this lens is not fixed. It is not a prison. It is adjustable, flexible, and trainable. You can teach your mind to notice the good just as easily as it learned to detect the bad. It starts with the smallest details: the breath that keeps you alive without asking for anything in return, the sunlight entering your room in the morning, the meal you get to eat, the responsibilities that remind you that you have purpose, the people who check on you without being asked, the moments of peace you usually rush past without appreciating. When you gently guide your mind to recognize these tiny blessings, you slowly break the habit of negativity. It does not happen overnight. It is not magic. It is psychological training. But over time, your mind begins shifting. Instead of instantly assuming the worst, it pauses. Instead of panicking, it analyzes. Instead of complaining, it appreciates. That's when life starts to feel lighter, clearer, and more beautiful, not because everything around you changed, but because you finally learned how to see what was always there. 2. Focus is a form of power. One of the most important truths the Stoics understood is that your focus is not just a mental habit, it is a form of power. Wherever your attention goes, your emotional energy follows. Most people live their entire lives without realizing that their mind is being pulled and pushed by everything around them. Notifications, people's opinions, old memories, fears about the future, small irritations, and even meaningless noise. Because of this, they feel tired without doing anything, stressed without real danger, and overwhelmed even when life is manageable. The mind becomes exhausted, not from reality, but from focusing on everything except what truly matters. When your focus is untrained, it behaves like a wild animal. It jumps from thought to thought, from fear to fear, from complaint to complaint. A small problem becomes a big disaster because the mind keeps feeding it attention. A single negative comment becomes a whole story about your worth. One past failure becomes a prediction that your future will go wrong too. When your mind is scattered, your emotional peace disappears because you are allowing anything and everything to influence how you feel. But the moment you learn to guide your focus, you regain control over your inner world. Instead of your thoughts choosing you, you begin choosing your thoughts. You start noticing when your mind is drifting into negativity and gently bring it back. You stop replaying old mistakes and instead redirect your attention to what you can do right now. You stop imagining the worst possible outcome and start grounding yourself in the present moment. This is not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about refusing to waste your mental energy on things that add no value to your life. The Stoics believe that a person becomes powerful not by controlling the world, but by controlling where their mind rests. If you focus on problems, life feels heavy. If you focus on what you can control, life feels clearer. If you focus on gratitude, life feels lighter. If you focus on progress instead of perfection, you grow faster and feel calmer. Your focus can turn a stressful life into a peaceful one simply by shifting what your mind prioritizes. Think about it this way. Two people can face the same challenge. The first spends all their mental energy worrying about the problem, complaining about it, and imagining how it might get worse. The second uses their mental energy to understand the situation, choose a response, and take one small step forward. The challenge is the same, but the experience is completely different because their focus is different. One becomes weaker, the other becomes wiser. One feels trapped, the other feels capable. One sees life as a threat, the other sees life as something they can work with. Training your focus is like sharpening a blade. At first it feels difficult. You will drift, you will get distracted, you will lose track of your thoughts. But with practice, daily, simple practice, you begin to strengthen your mind. You start choosing what deserves your attention and what does not. You stop giving your energy to useless worries. You stop letting every small inconvenience ruin your peace. You stop allowing people's opinions to shake your confidence. You stop letting the future steal your present. And slowly, life starts looking different. Not because life itself has changed, but because now your mind is disciplined enough to see what is useful, meaningful, and within your control. When you master your focus, you master your emotional stability. And when you master your emotional stability, almost nothing in life can break you. 3. Gratitude isn't set a feeling, it sets a practice. Most people think gratitude is something you feel only when life gives you something special: money, success, praise, comfort, or an unexpected blessing. They imagine gratitude as an emotion that appears automatically when things are going well. But the Stoics taught something very different. They understood that gratitude is not a feeling that magically shows up. It is a practice you must consciously develop, especially during the times when life does not look the way you want it to. Gratitude is a discipline of the mind, a habit of looking for what is present instead of obsessing over what is missing. Human beings have a natural tendency to notice problems before blessings. This is because the mind is wired for survival, not happiness. It pays more attention to threats than to gifts. So even if your life is filled with dozens of good things, peace, shelter, food, opportunities, friendships, health, your mind will cling to the one thing that went wrong. One argument, one failure, one disappointment becomes louder than the 100 quiet blessings you take for granted every day. You may not realize it, but your mind slowly becomes conditioned to focus on what is lacking, and as a result, you begin to believe your life is worse than it actually is. Gratitude is the antidote to this mental habit. When practiced daily, it retrains the brain to recognize the good that already exists. It forces the mind to slow down and acknowledge reality in a more balanced way. Instead of waking up and instantly thinking about what you do not have, gratitude teaches you to recognize what is already supporting your life: the roof above your head, the strength in your body, the air in your lungs, the people who care about you, the chances you still have to improve, the small pleasures that make your day easier. When you intentionally notice these things, you interrupt the mind's negativity bias. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the greatest wealth is to want what you already have. This does not mean you stop growing or stop setting goals. It means you stop basing your happiness on the future. You learn to appreciate the present moment, even if it is imperfect. You learn to value the ordinary parts of life that you usually rush past: the quiet mornings, the ability to walk, the taste of food, the warmth of sunlight, the moments of laughter, the peace in your home, the opportunities to learn something new. Gratitude teaches you that joy does not always come from big events. It often comes from noticing the small things you have ignored for years. When you begin practicing gratitude, your mind undergoes a psychological shift. Problems don't disappear, but they lose their dominance. Challenges don't feel as heavy because your attention is no longer trapped in negativity. You start to feel grounded instead of overwhelmed. You start seeing hope instead of despair. You start feeling supported instead of abandoned. Gratitude makes life feel bigger, brighter, and more meaningful, not because your circumstances changed, but because your perception became more balanced. You are no longer blind to the blessings that were always in front of you. Gratitude is not denial. It does not mean pretending everything is perfect. It simply means choosing to see what is still good in your life, even while you work through the things that are difficult. It is a reminder that no matter how heavy your circumstances feel, there is always something, however small, that can bring you back to the present and remind you that life is not as empty as your mind sometimes makes it seem. And the more you practice gratitude, the more natural it becomes. It transforms from a difficult exercise into a calm, steady awareness. Your mind learns to look for what lifts you rather than what drains you. Your heart becomes lighter, and your life feels richer. Gratitude does not change reality, but it changes the way you experience reality, and that alone can make your world feel completely different. 4. Reframe or remain the same. One of the greatest powers human beings possess is the ability to reinterpret what happens to them. The Stoics understood that life is not defined by events themselves, but by the meaning we assign to those events. Two people can go through the same hardship: losing a job, ending a relationship, facing rejection, experiencing failure, and walk away with completely different outcomes. One becomes bitter, hopeless, and resentful. The other becomes wiser, stronger, and more patient. The difference between these two people is not luck, intelligence, or personality. It is the skill of reframing. Reframing means taking the same situation but choosing a different perspective. It is seeing the bigger picture instead of being trapped in the immediate pain. Most people react to life on instinct. Something goes wrong, and they automatically assume it is a punishment, a setback, or evidence that they are unlucky. They let their minds fall into old patterns. Why do bad things always happen to me? This is the end. I'm ruined. Nothing ever works out. These interpretations are not facts. They are habits. And once the mind accepts these negative interpretations, emotions follow: anxiety, fear, anger, and hopelessness. The situation becomes heavier because the story surrounding it becomes darker. Reframing interrupts this automatic cycle. Instead of letting your mind decide the worst possible meaning, you consciously choose a more empowering one. You ask questions like, what can this teach me? What opportunity might this create later? How can this shape me into a better version of myself? What strength can I gain from enduring this? This shift in interpretation does not deny the pain or difficulty. It simply refuses to let the pain be the only meaning attached to the moment. Stoicism teaches that every obstacle carries something useful within it. A challenge can build patience. A setback can sharpen strategy. A failure can increase wisdom. A loss can deepen gratitude. A rejection can redirect you towards something better. But if you never pause to reframe your experience, you will miss these hidden gifts. And when you miss the gifts, life appears crueler than it actually is. It's important to understand that reframing is not done to escape reality. It is done to engage with reality more effectively. When something hurts, the pain is real, but the story that your life is over is not real. When something breaks your heart, the sadness is real, but the belief that you will never be happy again is not. Reframing helps separate the emotion from the exaggeration. It calms the mind enough for you to respond with clarity instead of panic. Think of your mind as a storyteller. If you let it operate without guidance, it will dramatize everything. It will turn a small problem into a disaster. It will turn uncertainty into danger. It will turn discomfort into defeat. But when you take control of the story, you take control of your emotional experience. You can turn a painful moment into a turning point. You can transform confusion into curiosity. You can convert weakness into training. You can transform an ending into a beginning. Every great growth in your life will come from reframing something difficult. Many people remain stuck, not because their problem is too big, but because their interpretation of the problem keeps them trapped. They convince themselves that the situation defines them, when in reality their response defines them much more. The moment you decide to reframe an experience, you shift from being a victim of life to being a student of life, and the student always grows. Reframing takes practice. At first, your old mental habits will resist. You will feel the urge to assume the worst. You will want to blame yourself, blame others, or blame life. But if you pause, even for a moment, and ask yourself, is there another way to see this? You create space for wisdom to enter. With time, this becomes natural. Your mind begins to automatically look for the lesson, the opportunity, the strength hidden inside every challenge. You develop emotional resilience. You become less reactive and more reflective. You become harder to break. And slowly, life begins to feel less threatening and more meaningful. You stop seeing yourself as someone things happen to and start seeing yourself as someone things happen for. You realize that growth does not come from comfort. It comes from the ability to reinterpret discomfort in a way that strengthens you, reframe, or remain the same. Every day, in every situation, that choice belongs to you. 5. Not everything deserves your energy. One of the greatest truths you will ever learn is that your mind is not meant to carry every burden, react to every situation, or solve every problem around you. Yet most people exhaust themselves mentally because they allow every small irritation, every negative comment, every worry, every rumor, every memory, and every fear to enter their inner space without questioning whether it deserves to be there. They let the world dump unnecessary noise into their minds and then wonder why they feel stressed, anxious, overwhelmed, or disconnected from life. Stoicism teaches that a peaceful mind is not something you find by chance, it is something you protect by choice. You must understand that your energy is limited. Your mental strength, your focus, your emotional stability, they are not infinite resources. Every worry you feed drains you a little. Every argument you entertain drains you a little. Every comparison you make drains you a little. Every unnecessary task, every meaningless conflict, every pointless overthinking session drains you a little more. And before you know it, you have nothing left for the things that truly matter: your growth, your health, your goals, your relationships, your peace. The Stoics believed that the mind should be treated like a sacred space, not a public park. Not everyone should have access to your thoughts. Not every event should have the power to disturb you. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every problem is your responsibility to solve. But when you are not mindful of this, you give access to everything and everyone. You let people's moods control yours. You let small inconveniences ruin your day. You let your past dictate your present. You let imagined fears drain your energy long before anything bad actually happens. The truth is, many of the things you worry about are not worth the emotional price you pay for them. Some arguments are not worth responding to because they change nothing. Some insults are not worth remembering because they say more about the other person than about you. Some tasks are not worth stressing over because they don't impact your life in any meaningful way. Some people are not worth your attention because they drain you more than they support you. Some fears are not worth entertaining because they exist only in your imagination. Learning to protect your energy is not selfish, it is wise. It allows you to conserve your strength for what actually helps you grow. It teaches your mind to stop magnifying every irritation. It helps you separate what is important from what is simply noise. You start asking better questions. Will this matter tomorrow? Does this affect my long-term well-being? Is this my responsibility? Is this worth losing my peace for? The more honestly you answer these questions, the more you realize that most things do not deserve your emotional involvement. When you filter what enters your mind, you create space for clarity. When you ignore what is meaningless, you create space for what is meaningful. When you stop reacting to everything, you regain the ability to respond wisely to the things that truly require your attention. You begin to see how much mental clutter you have been carrying simply because you weren't taught to say no to distractions, to noise, to the demands of others, and even to your own unhelpful thoughts. Stoicism teaches that calmness is not the result of a quiet environment, it is the result of a disciplined inner world. When your mind is selective, you become emotionally stronger. You stop being drained by unimportant things. You stop getting caught in drama. You stop worrying about what you cannot control. You stop trying to please people who will never be satisfied. You stop arguing with individuals who don't want to understand, and you stop wasting precious hours of your life on situations that contribute nothing to your growth. As you practice this, something beautiful happens. Life feels lighter. Your mind becomes clearer. Your emotions become steadier. You begin to recognize how much beauty, opportunity, and peace were always around you, but you were too mentally overloaded to notice. Protecting your energy gives you the mental space to appreciate the good, and when the noise fades, the blessings become easier to see. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not everything deserves your attention. Not everything deserves a place in your mind. And the sooner you learn to filter the world, the sooner you will experience the peace you've been chasing for years. 6. Acceptance is a form of peace, not defeat. One of the most misunderstood ideas in life is the concept of acceptance. Many people hear the word and instantly assume it means giving up, surrendering, or allowing life to walk all over them. They think acceptance is a sign of weakness, something only passive or hopeless people practice. But the Stoics taught the opposite. They understood that acceptance is not a collapse of strength. It is the beginning of strength. It is not a sign that you have stopped caring. It is a sign that you have stopped wasting your energy fighting battles that cannot be won. It is a shift from emotional resistance to emotional clarity. Human suffering often comes not from what happens, but from the mental war we create around what happens. When life changes in a way we did not want, we fight it in our minds. When someone leaves, when a plan fails, when a mistake happens, when the future becomes uncertain, we mentally replay it, argue with it, deny it, cling to it, or imagine how it should have happened. This resistance keeps us stuck in emotional turmoil. The event itself may have lasted a moment, but our refusal to accept it can last months or years. Acceptance breaks this cycle. It stops the mind from amplifying pain into suffering. Acceptance simply means looking at reality as it is, without illusions, without denial, and without unnecessary emotional chaos. It allows you to say, "This is what has happened, and now I must decide how I respond." The Stoics taught that no amount of wishing, complaining, or resisting can undo what already is. You cannot change the past. You cannot force people to behave differently. You cannot control every outcome, but you can control how you move forward. Acceptance does not chain you to your situation. It frees you to think clearly about what comes next. When you stop resisting reality, you release a tremendous amount of emotional tension. You stop replaying conversations in your mind. You stop torturing yourself with what if and why me. You stop clinging to versions of the past that no longer exist. You stop hoping life will magically return to how it used to be. Instead, you face life directly, without fear, without denial, and without unnecessary drama. Acceptance does not erase sadness, frustration, or disappointment, but it keeps those emotions from taking over your entire world. It is important to understand that acceptance does not mean agreement. You can accept something and still work to improve your situation. You can accept that a door has closed, but still search for a better one. You can accept that someone mistreated you, but still choose to grow from it. You can accept that you failed, but still stand up and try again. Acceptance is not a surrender of effort. It is a surrender of illusion. It is choosing to work with life, not against it. Think of a river. If you fall into the river and fight the current, you become exhausted and risk drowning. But if you stop resisting and let the current carry you, you conserve energy, regain balance, and eventually steer yourself to safety. Life works the same way. When you fight what you cannot control, you drown in emotional exhaustion. When you accept it, you gain the calmness needed to steer your life in a wiser direction. Many people stay stuck because they refuse to accept something that has already happened. They keep fighting a past that cannot be changed, a person who won't come back, a situation that is no longer in their hands. They drain themselves emotionally, physically, and mentally trying to force life to match their expectations. The Stoics recognize this as the root of suffering, the gap between reality and expectation. Acceptance closes that gap. It brings you back to the present moment, the only place where action is possible, where growth is possible, where peace is possible. As you begin to practice acceptance, you will notice an internal shift. Your mind becomes quieter. Your emotions become steadier. Your decisions become clearer. You stop overthinking and start responding with more wisdom. You stop fearing change and start adapting to it. You stop clinging to control and start trusting your resilience. Acceptance does not remove difficulty from your life, but it removes the unnecessary suffering layered on top of that difficulty. And slowly you begin to see the good again, not because your situation is perfect, but because your mind is no longer clouded by resistance. You gain the strength to focus on what you can influence and let go of what you cannot. You begin to move forward with inner peace instead of inner battle. Acceptance is the doorway. Once you step through it, life becomes clearer, calmer, and more manageable. 8. Your mind becomes what you feed it every day. One of the deepest truths about the human mind is that it is constantly being shaped by your habits, your environment, your choices, the conversations you have, the content you consume, and the thoughts you entertain when no one is watching. Most people never realize this. They wake up, scroll through negativity, absorb stress from their surroundings, listen to complaining voices, dwell on old fears, compare themselves to others, and then wonder why they feel empty, anxious, or disconnected from life. They assume their emotions come out of nowhere, when in reality their minds are simply reflecting the diet they have been fed for years. The Stoics understood that the mind is like fertile soil. Whatever seeds you plant will eventually grow, whether you plant flowers or weeds. If you expose your mind to negativity, your inner world becomes negative. If you constantly complain, your mind becomes trained to focus on what is wrong. If you surround yourself with people who gossip, fear, blame, and drain, your inner voice slowly becomes like theirs. If you consume chaos online or offline, you should not be surprised when your emotions begin to mirror that chaos. But the beautiful thing about the mind is that it can be reshaped at any moment. You can decide to feed it something better, something wiser, something cleaner. You can choose to surround yourself with inspiration instead of fear, knowledge instead of noise, gratitude instead of complaint, patience instead of panic. You can choose to read something meaningful, listen to something calming, watch something that strengthens your mindset, engage with people who uplift you, and speak words that align with who you want to become, not who you used to be. You can choose to break the cycle. Every single day, your mind is absorbing information, beliefs, attitudes, and emotional tones, even when you're not paying attention. That's why you must guard your mental environment with the same seriousness you protect your home. You would never let toxic chemicals spill across your bedroom. You would never allow strangers to fill your house with noise at 3 a.m. You would never let someone destroy your furniture in front of your eyes. And yet most people allow the equivalent to happen in their minds by entertaining thoughts that poison peace, by allowing gossipers to influence their mood, by replaying painful memories, by living in comparison culture, by letting fear live rent-free inside their heads. The Stoics taught that mental discipline begins with mental nutrition. What you repeatedly expose your mind to becomes the blueprint of your inner world. If you want to feel more peace, feed your mind peaceful things. If you want clarity, feed it clarity. If you want strength, feed it wisdom. If you want growth, feed it knowledge. If you want beauty, feed it gratitude. Nothing will change until your mental inputs change. You cannot build a peaceful life with a chaotic mind, and you cannot build a chaotic mind with peaceful surroundings. Your external life follows your internal life. Over time, this daily practice of feeding your mind correctly creates a psychological transformation. You begin to notice things you used to overlook. You become calmer in situations that once triggered you. You respond with patience where you once reacted with anger. You start seeing opportunities where you previously saw only problems. You begin to think deeply instead of emotionally. You become less influenced by people's negativity and more influenced by your own clarity. And the best part is this: once your mind becomes stronger, the world around you begins to feel easier. Problems don't disappear, but they lose their power over you. Challenges don't stop, but you approach them with stability instead of panic. You stop falling into old mental traps. You stop chasing validation. You stop drowning in comparison. You stop letting other people's moods control yours. You stop seeking meaning in the wrong places. Your inner world becomes the anchor that holds you steady in every storm. Because in the end, your mind is the place you live every second of your life. If you feed it wisdom, calmness, discipline, and gratitude, it becomes a home, not a battlefield. And once your mind becomes a calm home, life starts looking more beautiful, more balanced, and more hopeful than you ever imagined. Your emotional peace depends on what you choose to let go. One of the hardest truths in life, but also one of the most liberating, is that your emotional peace is determined less by what you hold on to and more by what you choose to release. Human beings carry so much weight inside their minds, old arguments replayed 1,000 times, memories that hurt more with every retelling, regrets that gnaw at the heart, anger that burns silently, and expectations that remain forever unmet. The Stoics understood that much of human suffering isn't caused by life itself, but by the mental baggage we refuse to set down. Most people do not realize how much they are carrying because they have been carrying it for years. The heaviness becomes normal. The anxiety feels familiar. The overthinking becomes routine. But just because you have lived this way for a long time does not mean you must continue. The mind is not designed to store endless emotional weight. It is designed to let things pass through, to process, to release, and to move on. When you don't let go, your mind becomes stuck in loops. Loops of pain, loops of fear, loops of comparison, loops of self-blame, loops of the past. Letting go does not mean forgetting what happened. It does not mean pretending the hurt was small or insignificant, and it does not mean giving people a free pass to mistreat you again. Letting go simply means refusing to hold on to the emotional poison that came with the experience. It means refusing to let past pain define your present identity. It means choosing inner peace over inner warfare. The Stoics taught that clinging is the opposite of inner freedom. When you cling to what you cannot control, people's behaviors, the outcome of past events, the choices someone else made, you trap yourself in an impossible fight. No amount of replaying the past changes it. No amount of imagining what could have been rewrites reality. No amount of bitterness punishes the person who hurt you. It only punishes you. And no amount of self-blame heals what has already happened. When you cling to what is gone, you block yourself from seeing all the good that is still available. Letting go is a skill. At first it feels uncomfortable because your mind is used to holding on. Pain becomes a story you believe defines you. But when you gently teach your mind that you do not need to carry everything, every insult, every betrayal, every disappointment, it begins to loosen its grip. You start to feel lighter. You begin to breathe deeper. You realize that not everything deserves space in your heart. You understand that not every person deserves a permanent place in your mind. Some things must be released, not because they are small, but because your peace is more important. Letting go also means letting go of expectations. Expectations of how someone should have treated you, how life should have turned out, how a dream should have unfolded. Expectations attach your happiness to a specific version of the future, and when that future does not occur, your mind creates suffering. When you learn to loosen your expectations and accept life as it is, not as you demanded it to be, you free yourself from endless disappointment. You develop emotional flexibility, you become adaptable, you become stronger. And with this strength comes clarity. You begin to see that some things ended because they were clearing the path for something better. You begin to see that what once broke you is now shaping you. You begin to see that letting go is not losing. It is choosing to move forward without dragging the past behind you. The moment you release what no longer belongs in your life, you create space for what does. You create space for new opportunities, new relationships, new habits, new peace. You create space for joy to enter. You create space for growth to happen. You create space for the present moment to finally reach you. Your emotional peace does not depend on having a perfect life. It depends on having the strength to release what disrupts your inner world. And once you learn to let go, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with understanding, you discover a deep, quiet freedom inside yourself. A freedom that makes life feel lighter, clearer, and far more beautiful than before. 10. Your life changes the moment you control your inner conversation. If you pay close attention to your thoughts, you will notice something surprising. Most of your suffering does not come from the world outside. It comes from the way you speak to yourself inside your mind. The Stoics understood that the inner conversation you have with yourself shapes the emotional climate of your entire life. If your inner voice is harsh, fearful, impatient, or self-critical, you will live in a constant state of tension. But if your inner voice is calm, disciplined, compassionate, and steady, you will experience life through a lens of strength and clarity. Every person has an internal narrator, a constant stream of thoughts that comments on everything you do, everything that happens, and everything you think might happen. The problem is that most people let this inner voice run wild. It exaggerates problems. It predicts disasters. It magnifies flaws. It compares your entire life to someone else's highlight moments. It reminds you of past mistakes, questions your abilities, and creates fear about the future. This voice becomes the unseen enemy living inside your mind, and as long as you let it speak without boundaries, it will drain your happiness, confidence, and peace. Stoicism teaches that this inner voice can either be your greatest ally or your greatest destroyer. The choice depends on your awareness and discipline. You cannot always stop negative thoughts from appearing, but you can decide whether to believe them. You can decide whether to give them power. You can decide whether to let them shape your mood, your behavior, and your future. The moment you start questioning your thoughts instead of blindly accepting them, you take the first step toward inner freedom. You must understand that not every thought in your mind is true. Not every fear is real. Not every criticism is accurate. Not every self-doubt reflects reality. Some thoughts are simply old mental habits created by years of conditioning, past trauma, or negative environments. But because these thoughts appear in your own mind, you assume they are you. They are not. They are patterns that can be rewired and replaced with healthier ones. Controlling your inner conversation does not mean forcing yourself to be positive all the time. That would be unrealistic, and the Stoics never promoted fake positivity. Instead, it means choosing a wiser narrative. When something goes wrong, your old inner voice may say, "I knew I would fail." But your trained inner voice says, "This is a setback, not a dead end. Let's learn and adjust." When someone disrespects you, your old inner voice might say, "Maybe I deserved it." But your wiser voice says, "Their behavior reflects them, not me. I decide who I am." When you face uncertainty, your old voice says, "Nothing will work out." But your disciplined voice says, "The future is unknown. Let me focus on what I can do right now." Your inner voice becomes the emotional filter that colors your entire world. If it constantly criticizes you, everything feels heavier. If it constantly doubts you, everything feels scarier. But if it begins to guide you, support you, and correct your thinking, your life becomes more stable, more grounded, and more hopeful. This is why controlling your inner dialogue is one of the most powerful forms of mental training. As you begin reshaping your inner narrative, something profound happens. You stop taking everything personally. You stop overreacting to every emotion. You stop assuming the worst. You stop living in your head and start living in reality. You begin to make decisions based on clarity instead of fear. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to move with confidence. You begin to see possibilities where you once saw limitations. And over time, this inner transformation changes everything else. Your relationships improve because you respond with understanding instead of insecurity. Your goals become more reachable because your mind stops sabotaging you. Your emotional state becomes steadier because your thoughts no longer control you, you control them. Your life becomes more peaceful because your mind finally becomes your ally instead of your enemy. This is the Stoic secret. The outer world is noisy, unpredictable, and full of challenges, but the inner world is yours to shape. When you master your inner voice, you master your inner world. And once you master your inner world, life begins to feel lighter, more beautiful, and far more manageable than you ever imagined. The moment you take control of your inner conversation is the moment your entire life begins to change. When you step back and look at everything you have learned, from shifting your perception to mastering your focus, to practicing gratitude, reframing challenges, protecting your energy, accepting reality, feeding your mind wisely, letting go of emotional burdens, and guiding your inner voice, you begin to realize something profound. Your life is shaped far more by your inner world than by your outer circumstances. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that the world will never stop being chaotic, unpredictable, or challenging. Difficult people will always exist. Unexpected problems will always appear. Plans will change. Mistakes will happen. Life will move in ways you cannot always control. But the strength to remain steady, peaceful, and clear-minded in the middle of all of this comes from the inner practices you choose every single day. Your mind is the lens through which you experience everything. If the lens is dark, everything looks dark. If the lens is scratched by old wounds, everything looks threatening. If the lens is fogged by fear, everything looks uncertain. But when you begin cleaning that lens, by changing how you think, what you focus on, what you release, and what you allow into your mental space, the world does not necessarily become easier, but it becomes clearer. You begin to see the good that was hidden beneath the noise. You begin to notice the beauty that was always present. You begin to recognize the opportunities that were impossible to see when your mind was flooded with negativity. Training your mind is not about pretending life is perfect. It is about teaching yourself to see reality with calmness instead of panic, with gratitude instead of complaint, with clarity instead of confusion. It is about building an inner strength that does not depend on circumstances. You are not trying to change the entire world. You are learning to change the only part of the world you truly control: your own thoughts, your own responses, your own interpretations, your own choices. And once your inner world becomes disciplined, balanced, and peaceful, everything outside becomes easier to navigate. Challenges become lessons instead of tragedies. Setbacks become redirections instead of failures. People's opinions lose their power. Small problems stop consuming your entire day. You grow emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You begin to live life instead of being dragged by it. This is the true Stoic transformation, not a life without problems, but a mind that is no longer destroyed by them. A mind that sees clearly, a mind that knows how to return to peace, a mind that recognizes the good even when life is not perfect, a mind that understands that happiness does not come from the external world. It grows from the thoughts you cultivate inside yourself. And as you continue practicing these lessons, you will notice a quiet shift happening within you. You will feel lighter, you will feel more grounded, you will feel more in control of your emotions. You will begin responding to life instead of reacting to it. You will start appreciating small moments in ways you never did before. You will find yourself becoming calmer, wiser, and more centered. This is what it means to train your mind to see the good, not escaping reality, but rising above it with clarity and strength. Your life becomes beautiful the moment your mind learns to see it. And the moment you begin that inner training, the world opens up in ways you once thought were impossible.